Aloha and welcome to Java. Thank you all very kindly for joining me. This is Sunday, February 25th, 2024. I especially thank you all for being here today. It was a very odd week last week, and for me personally was a bit difficult, especially towards the end. I did have a celebration of life yesterday, and ready to get back into work and just kind of dig in. So we've got the MMRI up currently. We did watch some major fluctuations in the 10-year yield as well as the risk indicator. We'll be keeping an eye on that to kind of watch as measurement for the debt fluctuations going on. So we've got calendar ahead for this week, the major reports that we are expecting to hear from. We'll be watching in particular these inflation gauges as assigned to the Fed as well. People are still watching their rate cuts. So we'll see how that goes. This is a calendar of the earnings that we are expecting from companies this week. We've got a few larger ones, and I'll be watching ones in particular for kind of keynotes that will tell us real consumer spending, but all of these are lagging indicators in their company earnings. So, a word on banking and the economy. So, we've got the United States money supply shrinking the most since the Great Depression, talking about how this is kind of headwinds for the economy. Well, they're talking about money supply is M1, is what we call the term. And that is how much money everybody has. So if we gave everybody $1,000,000, it would create inflation because everybody would be willing to pay more for their products. At the same time, the second part of this that I think they're not looking at right now is the flow of money. So if everybody has $1,000,000, but nobody's willing to spend any of it, then that will also bring prices down as well as taking money out of the system. So the money supply is going down because banks are no longer lending right now. They're tightening lending standards, and people are not able to pay their bills or pay back the loans. And so what's going on is everyone is beginning to also hold as much money as they possibly can, moving into cash. So we've got that movement going on as well. I'll go back into that in a bit. So we had this question come up. This was on X, where the juice, quote unquote, is coming from to fuel all of this market speculation. Rates are higher and consumers seem tapped out. And he's talking about how it's not just the Fed and QE this time. Well, a portion of that is. Portion of that is what is still going on, the employment retention credit that we talked about, that is a boon for businesses. It still has not timed out completely yet. And we've also got migrant spending, basically. We've got multiple migrants that have gotten $10,000 charge cards. So that's boosting local markets in those areas, in New York in particular. But it's happening in many places. So that's giving it a bit of a boost. And we've also got, from all of the war spending, basically, those weapons going into our GDP and then also kind of funneling back. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So I want to jump over to Jack Dorsey, who is the one that started Twitter years ago. And he's also the CEO of Block, or also used to be called Square. So he's talking about Square and Cash App trying to make them more like a social bank. So we'll see what his plans are for that, because we've got a few more things on the banks. So what I was speaking about as far as on Ukraine and the weapons, they said it out loud in this interview, saying that, quote, "We have to remember that the bulk of this money is going right back into the US to make those weapons," unquote. And they're talking about the billions of aid for the package that they want to force Americans to spend to go over to Ukraine to continue this war. So that's a good portion of the spending, and we had talked about that before. So we've got the ECB, European Central Bank, talking about closing in on a new framework for interbank revival. So this is a small story that got overlooked, and I think it's pretty critical going forward, because really what they're talking about is the structural backbone that they're going to do between these bank loans. And basically, this is another way to set up for central bank digital currencies. They are developing these, and they're talking about how they're going to interchange and pay with smaller banks, basically. They're going to shift everybody over to this as soon as there is urgent need. So with the real economy, we've got more mainstream media and more stories coming out to cover what's actually going on. This one from Ford. They halted shipments of the new F-150 Lightning EVs, their electric vehicle trucks. They weren't doing any sales and have got a backlog of orders. So after all of the strikes and the costs that they had, they've come out with this. They had to halt shipments because all of the dealers are backed up. But they don't want anyone to panic because they want people to still purchase their trucks off of these dealer lots. So they came out with this story saying that they don't know when they expect to resume shipments. And they're saying that they're checking an issue, and that's why it's held up. So they held it up to perform quality checks. So it's a pretty good story. Don't know when they're going to produce again. And I suspect that's when they start moving again because of production. They're not selling the vehicles, and cars are coming down in price. They can't finance them anymore, and that's a huge issue. So on the offset, we've got Riot is a cryptocurrency mining company in Texas. So this is a positive story. They boosted their Bitcoin output by 19% last year. And so this is very positive for their stock. Bitcoin has been up in price. So right now, not just with the miners, but how much they hold, they're in a very um, solid position at the moment. So Bitcoin kind of hovering around the 52,000 level, between 51 and 53, so long as it stays there. Prior to the halving, that could be a very good place for this. So he came out with another story. The Marine Corps is the first United States military branch to pass financial audit. So this is saying they are the first one ever to pass a complete financial audit, and they successfully accounted for more than $46.3 billion in assets at the end of a 2-year effort. So Pentagon has not been able to pass one yet, but finally somebody did in the government, and I expect that'll probably be the last one, at least for some time. So this story is from, he's basically a pawn dealer, if you will, secondary, and he's reporting, and I've heard this from a couple others also, but he posted, public is starting to dump their gold and silver in the store. This will suppress the physical price further, and this is also a run to cash, the safety play. So he's saying how he's purchased entire estate sales a few times over, all of the gold and all of the silver that they can get hold of. He says the middle class is broke and economic crash is here right now. So kind of going with that, that's what we were saying about keeping physical cash. There is a run to cash. I think there will be a run on the banks. So don't keep it in the banks because they will freeze the ATM cards when they need to. And so he's showing where everybody, I'd gone through this before, the steps that it goes through. People are selling everything they've got, moving into cash. And this is one of the final steps because a lot of them have lost their jobs. So we've also got a deepening downturn in agriculture. Well, of course, this is a red flag for banks because they purchase ahead of time in futures for grains when they produce. So these are other bad loans that are going to be called in sometime around fall. So with that, I also want to bring up some of the other things that are affecting us and this move into cash. We heard that Jamie Dimon, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, and Warren Buffett are all selling their stocks in their own companies and moving into cash as well. So it's a good sign to pay attention to, that the smart money always gets out early. Okay. And as I said, we've got that migrant money that is kind of holding it up temporarily, as well as the Ukraine war. So March 11th, they stopped their short-term lending to banks, and it will be extended for a period of time, but that will end very quickly. So with that, got a couple of other stories I would like to go through. One is they're talking about the artificial intelligence boom, sparking concern over big tech's water consumption. because they need this to cool down the processors. So again, water coming into focus, and it's people aren't really paying attention yet. And we've got this coming out about Broadcom. Okay, so Broadcom makes smaller, we'll call them utilitarian chips because they're not artificial intelligence types. They're nearing a $3.8 billion sale of remote access to another company. So this basically, there are smaller chips that work within not the processors, but they would allow shutdowns and restarts of equipment remotely. So this was how there were some major hacks on things going on. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because these chips are also in a lot of the infrastructure. They control water, utility companies, your power, all of the smaller parts that you don't think about. So that's very important security issue, basically. And now for a short funny that I thought was kind of cute. Thanks to Robert Malone, talking about tagging fish, and they go about their business not realizing they're being tracked. And of course, people with their phones. So with this, I had mentioned this in a tweet also. If you follow me there, the UN with their legal identity agenda, and I'll leave their links below, and the biometrics and how that's coming along. So with that, I wish you a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I hope you like this video. And until I see you again, my friends, stay free.